From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Costa Rica's Supreme Court has rejected the tax reform approved by the Legislative Assembly 10 days ago. The judiciary has asked lawmakers to modify 4 aspects of the reform. Now the Legislative Assembly can either comply with the Supreme Court's decision or keep the bill as it is. The reform was approved in a first debate with 35 votes. People have protested the reform for over a month now. One person has been shot dead in Haiti during protests after a ceremony for the anniversary of the killing of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. The shooting occurred in Port-au-Prince as hundreds of people protested for an investigation into an oil corruption scandal. Police officers are said to have fired live ammunition as protesters threw rocks. Earlier on, reports circulated on social media claiming that Haiti's President Jovenel Moïse had been shot. However, these have since been confirmed as false. Social movements and political organizations want authorities to be held responsible for these violent protests. Prime Minister Jean-Henry Son has called on people to remain calm. Our correspondent in Port-au-Prince, Daisy Toussaint, has more details.
Opposition leaders and social organizations have taken to the streets to protest against the embezzlement of public funds. Demonstrators want to pressure the government to carry an investigation into the corruption allegation and charge those responsible. They have also asked the police to avoid provoking protesters and not to create violence. On their part, social organizations said the government is to blame for the death of a person during the demonstration. But police members said they will not tolerate any acts of violence and explained that all their measures secure the country. Prime Minister Jean-Henry Seand has called on people to remain calm and trust the government.
A caravan of migrants heading to the United States from Honduras say no threats can stop them. A reported 3,000 migrants have reached Guatemala, where authorities are trying to stop them. Many have even started to ask truck drivers to take them as they make their way towards Mexico. The migrants say they can no longer tolerate the violence and poverty in Honduras. One of the banners they are carrying says, "We are not leaving, they are kicking us out." According to the World Bank, 64% of Honduran population lives in poverty. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to cut all aid to Honduras if he doesn't halt the caravan. Our correspondent in Guatemala, Mario Rosales, has more details.
We are on the way to the department of Zacapa, where hundreds of Honduran migrants continue moving in towards Guatemala City in order to get to the Mexican border. Some of them said they fear the police will try to stop them. For this reason, some groups separated from the main caravan so they could spread out and avoid getting caught. Last night, around 600 Honduran migrants arrived to the capital city. They say the caravan will continue their journey to cross the Mexican border in order to get to the United States.
Thank you, Mario, for that report. For his part, the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, says the caravan was organized by the opposition to undermine his government.
The governments of Mexico, Guatemala and the United States have announced they will apply their immigration laws and further norms in line with their sovereignty. Hondurans should not get involved in this political game because it is inhumane. It is to be condemned. Today, the migrants are in danger. I cannot understand how somebody could use the misery of the people for political ends, risking their lives with children, with the elderly. This should not happen. This should not be allowed under the basic principles of human dignity.
But those marching as part of the caravan tell a different story.
Juan Orlando Hernandez is only asking for a return because he will lose U.S. funding. He won't be able to ride around in private helicopters or expensive cars anymore. We will not return. Juan Orlando Hernandez, I am not a leader. I am part of the people. And if I have to die for them, I will. We will fight our way north if we have to. Now, we only ask the Mexican government to let us through.
As the caravan moves forward, Mexican federal police are being deployed to the country's southern border. The police state their intentions is not to prevent migrants from coming into Mexico, but to aid the National Institute of Migration during processing. According to government officials, these measures are taken in order to guarantee migrants' human rights. They also say that those who fulfill all migration requirements will be prioritized. And on Tuesday, the Venezuelan government announced it will stop using the US dollar for international and domestic transactions. Our correspondent in Caracas, Luis Tavera, explains.
The government in Venezuela is developing its strategy to combat what it calls a financial war organized by the United States. The minister in charge of the economic area, Tarek El-Aissami, announced new policies for the use of convertible currencies like the euro and the yuan, and a move away from the US dollar. He said that the dollar has been part of Venezuela's international transactions, but the financial blockade imposed on Venezuela has made it more difficult to implement the government's economic recovery plan. This plan that started almost 2 months ago with the introduction of the new currency, the sovereign bolivar. Al-Aissami said this would be part of a new strategy to stop using the dollar and allow the government to implement all the different components of the economic plan, which aims to overcome the impact of the economic war on the Venezuelan people.
The judiciary in Peru is deciding on the appeal requested by the leader of Popular Force, Keiko Fujimori. She was arrested on corruption charges 1 week ago. Judges will have to decide whether to grant the daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori provisional release. Keiko is being investigated for money laundering linked to the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. Authorities arrested her for 10 days as a precautionary measure. However, her defense team says there are not enough evidence to build a case against her. Meanwhile, protesters have taken place in capital Lima against corruption. The demonstration started in Plaza San Martin, filling up the streets with people singing and holding a huge Peruvian flag. We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Argentina has reached a 6.5% inflation rate in September, their worst registered this year. According to the National Institute of Statistics and Census, this has been one of the highest inflation rates since the 2001 crisis. Argentina is living an economic breakdown, pushing the government to take a $57 billion loan with the International Monetary Fund. University students in Colombia are mobilizing to protest the education budget. Our correspondent in Bogota, Paola Fernandez, brings us more.
Students are about to start their strike in many different cities across the country. I want you to meet Professor Adolfo Arteortua, who's been on hunger strike since yesterday. Professor, tell us what message you are trying to send.
We are 3 of us across Colombia who are on hunger strike.
We do this as a show of solidarity and love for our students who are fighting for better public education.
Do you fully support students' protests?
Yes, I respect and support them. They know more than anyone how much we need a substantial budgetary allocation.
Students from every region in the country have come to Bogota to mobilize.
A citizen alliance in Brazil managed to remove a number of fake news articles from various social media sites. Supporters of far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro are accused of spreading those false stories.
The Supreme Electoral Court has ruled that fake news shared on social media by Carlos Bolsonaro, son of one of Brazil's presidential candidates, be scrubbed from social media. Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad welcomed the court's decision.
This was a years-long battle that we finally managed to win, and I can only hope the press will spread this news, just like their lies were spread to people who didn't know better.
Amid the wave of fake news about Fernando Haddad being spread on social media platforms such as WhatsApp, Jair Bolsonaro has refused to take part in any electoral debate, to even explain his government plan. In the latest polls, Bolsonaro's approval rating continues to rise as Haddad's drops.
What is at play here is the very fight for our rights, of choosing our leaders. We have 10 days to turn things around, to show the Brazilian people who Jair Bolsonaro really is, to unmask him once and for all.
A 15-person team from digital strategy agency AM4 is responsible for spreading Bolsonaro-related content in over 1,500 WhatsApp groups, which is then spread further by members of those groups. On top of this, Bolsonaro is also shielded from any media scrutiny, thanks to the support of Record TV, the second-largest TV channel in Brazil. People opposing totalitarianism are ready to stand against media corporations.
We must reach out to the people to clarify what's really happening in our country. We must unmask the underground lies that are affecting these elections. We must unmask the candidate who positions himself as a savior but is actually a violent, lying coward. He's not the person who should lead Brazil.
Outside of the virtual world and TV screens, protesters take to the streets under the LA Now slogan. In these same streets, artists have paid homage to the message of Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters, who recently warned Brazilians about the risks of neo-fascism.
The wall represents a division amongst ourselves that causes us to quarrel and turn on each other. The powers that be are influencing division in society. Fake news and media manipulation are leading common citizens to fight with their own neighbors.
By request of Rosa Weber, president of the Supreme Electoral Court, representatives from the Workers' Party and the Social Liberal Party were called to a meeting to discuss these issues. But at the last minute, Bolsonaro's committee asked for it to be postponed.
The Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has met with leaders of Evangelical Church in Sao Paulo 2 weeks ahead of the election runoff. In the meeting, he said there are contradictions between religious values and the violence that Bolsonaro defends. Brazil is mainly a Catholic country, but evangelicals are believed to have strongly grown in the last years.
It's not about options, but the need today to take position democratically in this electoral process. What's at stake is not simply a party. It's not that. What's at stake is the issue of the Brazilian democracy.
2 Peruvian journalists are being sued for defamation by an archbishop who they accuse of taking part in sexual abuse cover-up. The journalists, Paola Ugaz and Pedro Salinas, both of whom investigated the abuses, have been sued by the Archbishop of Piura. They have been issued a notice from the court and have to respond within 5 days. If found guilty, they could face up to 3 years in prison and a $6,000 fine.
This is a reprisal. This is vengeance from one of the members of the elite Catholic society against the 2 journalists that investigated and uncovered this Pandora's box.
Archbishop Eguren's attitude in terms of his peers in the church is contradictory and really striking, because doing this is clearly going against what Pope Francis has proposed.
Workers of a museum that showcases the history of the Malvinas Islands are then denouncing its closure by the government.
Asuncion works in the Malvinas Museum as a guide. She and her co-workers are worried that the museum is being emptied of its contents and its closure is imminent.
We will live it with a lot of sadness, but not without a fight as we have organized ourselves. We will defend the cause and the rights of the workers.
People from all walks of life, including soldiers, have come together to launch June 10th to try and keep the museum and the cause alive.
Macri can see this museum is a center of the resistance. He tried to make changes here. When school came to visit the museum, they found workers committed to the Malvinas cause. We don't deny this museum was created in a period of history when popular leaders from the region fought for the defense of Malvinas.
As time goes by, the cause is not forgotten. People are collectively standing up to the government for giving away the island's natural resources to the UK.
This government does not support sovereignty. They are working in favor of commercial interests that don't benefit people or the country.
I thought we would progress as we did with the last government, but it didn't work out like that. They betrayed us, and we are going backwards.
Wounds are still fresh, and there are some things that are non-negotiable. The decision to disregard so easily the history behind the island and to sign an agreement with the UK is one of them.
It's worrying that the claim to sovereignty doesn't have strength, because since the return to democracy, Argentina has received a lot of support from international bodies, especially from UN. This support meant that the UK was isolated.
People are worried that Latin America is losing to neocolonialism. The Argentines won't forget the Malvinas cause.
Mexico is suffering increasing violence and health problems as a byproduct of organized crime and drug trafficking to the United States.
Drug addiction in Mexico is one of the greatest health sector burdens. According to official figures, this incidence of drug use increased by nearly 50% in the last 7 years. It is especially prevalent among young people. Some believe this wasn't addressed quickly enough. Innovative methods and traditional awareness campaigns could have been used.
I believe that kids are already different. I think these campaigns do the contrary and call more attention.
Maybe with other ways so they can see the experiences and not just a piece of paper.
Despite this, a series of cartoons designed to raise awareness in Mexican children about the risks and consequences of drug use was presented at the National Institute of Psychiatry.
The sectors do not bet on long-term measures, but only on short-term strategies. It seems like we should bank on a constant program that helps our population to decrease these problems.
International support is demanded, especially from the United States, because Mexico is a producer and a bridge to this market. However, one expert believes that President Donald Trump's anti-drug stance towards Mexico is erratic.
He makes generalizations saying that Mexicans are murderers and rapists and traffickers, but there is no evidence that the Border Patrol are modifying their methods, for example.
He also points out that the public health sector has recorded an increase in deaths due to the violence generated by drug trafficking to the United States, which is the main consumer of these illegal substances.
Drug trafficking is going through the border little by little, and it comes back with guns or dollars.
Only 2% of the national health expenditure budget is spent in drug use prevention programs. Organizations such as Mexicans Against Corruption have criticized the government's approach, which resulted in more than 1.5 million children not having access to mandatory vaccines, according to the National Health Plan.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has blacklisted 8 Caribbean countries. They have been flagged by the organization as operating high-risk schemes that sell residency or citizenship. Citizenship by investment schemes allow foreign individuals to obtain citizenship or residency rights on the basis of local investments or against a flat fee. The organization says this can also be used to hide their assets offshore. Prison officers in Trinidad are vowing to walk off the job in response to the shooting death of another prisoner officer. Prison Officers Association President Cerrone Richards said he and his men are prepared to leave the nation's prisons unmanned. 5 prison officers have been murdered in Trinidad so far for the year, and in response, the National Security Minister said if prison officers choose to down tools, his ministry will fill the void. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
Now I become a prisoner. The reason why we are here is because we are from Africa and we are black.
Documentaries Telesur presents
כל יהודי שרוצה לבוא לישראל, זה הבית שלו, זה מקום המפלט שלו. בשביל זה אני לא רוצה שיבואו לי כל בני ערב רב, מה שנקרא, מכל העולם, בגלל שבישראל זאת מדינה דמוקרטית, ופה אפשר לעשות מה שרוצים.
Promised Land, Excluded People. Sunday, only Telesur.
Welcome back. People in the West Bank have protested the demolition of a village in the area. 1 man injured by Israeli security forces had to be carried out to an ambulance as the vehicle was not allowed to enter the village. Security forces also teaser and pepper sprayed another protester after he questioned the Border Patrol police for arresting a teenage Palestinian girl. United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Stefan de Mistura, has announced he will step down at the end of November. The diplomat told the UN Security Council he was leaving for personal reasons. De Mistura will be traveling to Damascus next week to push for the creation of a committee to agree on a post-war constitution for Syria. He assures that he will try to push for agreement before he resigns.
So I will therefore report in November to the Secretary General and to the Security Council the status of the implementation of the Constitutional Committee in order to allow the Secretary General and the Security Council to draw their own conclusions, hoping that that will also help my successor so that he or she will be able to start from a clear and clean ground.
United Nations Special Rapporteur Idris Jazairi has warned member states that restrictive economic sanctions are illegal. During the presentation of his report to the General Assembly, Jazairi said such measures are immoral forms of coercion before they violate human rights. He warned that economic wars can kill people just like conventional wars. Jazairi has advocated for the resolution of conflicts between states through peaceful means.
Magic worked during our conference.
A Saudi team investigating the disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi has left the Saudi Consul General's residence in Istanbul. Police used drones and UV lights while they searched the premises for several hours. Khashoggi was last seen on October 2nd entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. People in Russia have paid their respect to the victims of a college shooting in Crimea on Wednesday. They left flowers and candles in the memory of at least 19 people killed in a mass shooting at a technical college in the city of Kerch. The investigative committee has identified the attacker as an 18-year-old student attending the institution. He's suspected to set off a bomb in the cafeteria and shoot it at random. He killed himself afterwards.
So 2-3 minutes before the explosion, I left the first building. I was opening the door, I heard the explosion. I turned away, and I heard a shooting. Then it was panic. What followed is unknown.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed his condolences for the victims of the attack.
I would like to express condolences to relatives of those who died and express hope that victims will recover as soon as possible. And we will do everything possible for this. People will be informed about the results of the work of law enforcement bodies and special services. Dear friends, in commemoration of those who died, I ask to pay respect to them with a moment of silence.
One of the most famous meteorite showers of the year is set to reach its peak this weekend. The Orion Needs will be visible in the night sky to most, just after the moon sets in your location on Sunday. It's created by particles from Halley's Comet, which Earth passes through twice a year. As they enter Earth's atmosphere, they burn up and glow, creating the shooting star effect. We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.